You'll be telling me next that you can use it to write robots using your Raspberry Pi version of ColdFusion.
um, like this robot here.
Oh,
This little guy.
for those who are listening on audio, it's like a little car, and in the middle of it, there's a small Raspberry Pi processor
with eyes that peer into your soul. It's actually an ultrasonic depth sensor. Sadly,
depth or death?
Open here for reference.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Brad Wood, and we're going to talk about the new release of CommandBox for ColdFusion, and he's giving a deep dive on that at Into the Box, an all-day workshop all about it. And today we'll have a look at what CommandBox is and how you'd use it and why you'd use it, why all ColdFusion users should be using it, how you can write scripts using CommandBox to like create batch files, I guess, in effect. We'll also look how you can use it for server management, some really cool things it does there, automatically downloading different versions of Adobe or Lucee ColdFusion. Also, we'll look at package management and how you can use it for creating things there, and how you can extend CommandBox with your own commands. So welcome, Brad.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And yeah, I haven't seen you for at least a few months. So for people who don't know, Brad is the Ortus evangelist he's the everything box evangelist. And he also helped create CommandBox and some of the other box products.
Yep. So I'm the developer advocate evangelist, whatever you want to call it, for CommandBox and ColdBox, and maybe possibly to a lesser extent ForgeBox. But I'll generally talk about any box that you'll ask me about, regardless. But yep, I've helped with all the box products in some way or another. But I am the lead developer of CommandBox, so it's sort of my baby, as Luis says.
Fabulous. Well, a great baby it is. But for those listeners who haven't come across CommandBox, what exactly is it?
Yeah, so CommandBox is sort of it was kind of a missing link in the tooling chain that the ColdFusion developers, never really had. And it's a command line utility that you run from the shell or from your terminal, and it runs on Mac or on Linux or Windows, and it lets you do a bunch of kind of automation and scaffolding and dealing with servers and just helping manage your ColdFusion applications from the command line, which is a tool that, like I said, didn't really exist before 3 or 4 years ago in the ColdFusion space. But these are common tools that PHP or developers or Node developers or even Java developers have at their disposal. Kind of the biggest sort of pieces is the ability to run ColdFusion code from the command line without the need to start a server. To be able to just point to a CFML file and say, just run this as like a cron job, or just running single lines of code from the REPL just to test things out. If you think to yourself, how does a certain function in ColdFusion work? Instead of having to, start a web server, put an index.cfm, open it in your IDE, put in some code, save it, open up a web browser, hit that, you can pull open CommandBox and you can just run that line of code completely outside of a server environment. So it's really kind of in the realm of productivity and automation. And there's a lot more of it does. It can start servers for you, and things of that nature.
So basically, it's a scripting language that uses ColdFusion for the scripting, and in addition has superpowers to control ColdFusion servers.
Superpowers. Yeah, and that's a good point that you brought that up. So it's a tool aimed at ColdFusion developers doing ColdFusion-y ththings with ColdFusion code and ColdFusion servers. But yeah, CommandBox itself internally is actually written in ColdFusion. I think it would have felt a little cheap if we used, Node or Java to write our, the official CFML CLI. So, it uses a bit of Java here and there to bootstrap some things in and some libraries out the internet. But the bulk of CommandBox itself is actually written in CFML. And what's nice about that is that means that if you're a CFML developer and you're using CommandBox and you find a bug or you think of a feature, you can dig in and you can edit the code and you can help contribute back. It's not written in an entire different language, which is one of the big problems. You run into people that want to contribute to, say, Lucee server might have the desire, but they have to know some hardcore Java to really be able to do anything. With CommandBox, the entire product's written in ColdFusion, so it's very familiar on the inside to people.
I kind of wonder why they didn't write Lucee in ColdFusion and just had the time-sensitive bits kind of written in Java, because ColdFusion compiles to Java, so.
Does. That would definitely be an
interesting. 99% of that compiler interpreter or whatever it is probably isn't exactly time critical.
I don't know. That's an interesting thought.
Then people could contribute. Just a thought for the future for Adobe or Lucee.
Well, one thing that Lucee does let you do, for instance, if you're adding core functions or tags, it does give you the ability to write those in CFML, and they behave just like any other built-in function or tag. And typically, those see a lot higher pick up an uptake from people than the features that allow you to write new CFML tags in Java. People don't usually use that feature as much because it kind of boils down to familiarity. CFML developers aren't going to be as likely to contribute to something that's written in a language that's foreign to them.
Yeah. So why should every CFer be using CommandBox?
Why should every CFer be using CommandBox? Well, the State of the Union survey, maybe you've heard of it. The State of the CF Union survey that came out actually had some pretty good numbers of the subset of the community who responded to the survey. I think 70 to 80% of people ticked that they had used CommandBox in some fashion, which is fantastic news. The reason why everyone should be using it, in my incredibly biased opinion, if for nothing else, is just simply productivity. It takes some of the more complicated tasks, especially around managing servers. For years I had to deal with having multiple versions of Adobe ColdFusion and Lucee server or Rilo server installed all on my local hard drive. At the same time, I had to have all these installations, and I had to have them all running on different ports, and I had to keep all their files separated, and I had to have Apache or IIS set up. And this was just for my regular everyday local development. And if I wanted to do some quick testing, I had to commandeer one of those other servers, and swap out what was in the web root. And I mean, that's not a problem that was unique to me. That's something that, most ColdFusion developers deal with, that do any kind of local development. And CommandBox lets you kind of throw all that in the waste bin, and having nothing installed on your machine, no ColdFusion servers, no Lucee servers, no IIS or Apache. You can just kind of point CommandBox to a folder and say, start me a web server right here. This is my new web root, and make it be Adobe 11 Update 13, right? And, it does some magic, downloads some stuff, and the next thing you know, you have a running ColdFusion 11 server. And when you're done with it, you just stop it and you can delete it, and it's like it never happened. And that kind of productivity can, save you hours of headaches and poking around and manually updating your installations and trying to keep them in sync. And then take all of that and now distribute that across your entire team of developers, 5, 10, maybe 15 developers, all with the same mess of installations on their local hard drives with varying configurations and varying directory setups. And all of a sudden you can hand them all a copy of CommandBox and say, just clone our code, run the server start command, and these JSON files will kick in and everything will be taken care of. That's a great time saver for an individual or for a team. And I think that's where we've seen the most usage in CommandBox, is people just wanting to manage their servers with it, ignoring all the cool scaffolding and REPL nonsense that it does. The biggest used feature is just servers. In fact, I was looking at some of our download statistics, and I think the Adobe slug on ForgeBox, which is what you hit to install an Adobe server, had like 13,000 downloads last year. And so it's a little tricky to turn that into like actual numbers. Like, that probably wasn't 13,000 humans, on 13,000 computers, but at some point in time, at least 13,000 servers were started that required a version of Adobe ColdFusion to be downloaded. And that to me, I mean, it tells me at least a decent number of people are out there using it. And that's only a one-time download the first time you start the server. So, obviously there's quite a few server starts going on out there. And so that's kind of, to me, the trademark feature that really makes, CommandBox indispensable. Now, in my personal workflow, all of my local development is done with CommandBox servers at this point. I don't have to deal with all those other installations playing nicely together.
And then if you're spinning up a new server, how many seconds does it typically take using CommandBox?
If the version of Adobe or Lucee that you're asking to be started has been downloaded in the past, so nothing new needs to be downloaded, depending on your computer and how slow it is, usually you'll see the browser window pop up within 5 to 10 seconds.
So that compares to the hours you might spend manually installing a version of ColdFusion to do test something out.
So I mean, Lucee 5 is about a 70 megabyte download, and Adobe ColdFusion 2016 is about a 300 megabyte download. So based on your internet connection speeds, I have Google Fiber here in Kansas City, so I get gigabit speeds. I can download a new Lucee server version, which is 70 megs in like 5 seconds. So, overall, it's not that big of a deal. If you're on a dial-up modem, you need to account for those first download times. But I mean, generally speaking, once everything's downloaded and the server's ready to start, you're really just looking at, a matter of seconds before the server's up and running and the browser window's open.
The other thing I like is you don't have to dig up where those older versions are. Sometimes it's hard to find an install for an old version.
Well, that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, are using like ColdFusion 10. Going back to the State of the CF Union survey, there was a really good showing still. I say good in a bad way. CF10 users. Which is no longer a supported version, of Adobe ColdFusion. It's not receiving security updates, but there's just a lot of people using it. And you're right. If what if you need a specific update version of CF10 from, 6 years ago or however long ago that would be? That can be difficult to find on the internet, and you're not going to find that on Adobe's official site. You have to go into the backwaters of, Google Drive or something. But, with CommandBox, who cares? You just tell the nice CLI what version you'd like it to start for you, and it'll take care of the rest. It downloads what it needs, and it just does it.
So CommandBox version 4 is going to be out into the box. Is that an official announcement, or?
God willing, yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely our plan, is to have a final release of CommandBox 4. And it's been in snapshot builds since about December. I kind of kicked it into high gear over my Christmas break when I had nothing better to do but drink eggnog and work on CommandBox. So it's been an active development, and there's quite a few people who've been testing on the snapshot near the bleeding edge, which is very nice. If I break something and commit it, I'll have someone email me like that day, like, hey, what'd you do? Like, I just updated the latest snapshot and it's broken, which is great to get that, that feedback cycle. Because otherwise what happens is you make a final release and you have all this fanfare and then you realize it's full of bugs. So I love the early adopters who help me keep an eye. But yeah, it's a super exciting release. It's one of the, well, I don't want to say it's one of the biggest releases, because every time we have a major release, I think to myself, this is one of the biggest releases. But it comes with a lot of changes that affect the underpinnings of CommandBox. CommandBox 1.0 ran on Rilo, right? And then, the Lucee server fork happened, and so around CommandBox 2.0 or so, we converted over to Lucee, and it was Lucee, 4 at the time. And Lucee 5's been out for quite some time, but CommandBox, the 3 series of CommandBox, which is currently a 3.9.2, has still been on Lucee 4. And largely that was due to some of the startup performance. When you're starting a server up, if it takes 9 or 10 seconds to start the server, who cares? Not a big deal. When you're starting a command line utility, you want that to really be as snappy as possible. I mean, you're sitting there like literally waiting for it to start and run its thing and exit. So there was several rounds of kind of improvements I went over with Misha to kind of really tighten down all the little bits of the startup times to get Lucee 5 as snappy as Lucee 4 was. Lucee 5 was always very quick once it was started, but those initial startup times were a bit long. And by a bit long, I mean maybe 10 to 15 seconds, but that's a long time to wait for a CLI to open up. So once Lucee 5's startup times finally came down to where Lucee 4 was, that's when I finally started targeting to switch over to it. So the underlying CFML engine in CommandBox and CommandBox 4 will be Lucee 5, which comes with a lot of new features. It comes with a lot of improvements just that are inherent to Lucee 5, which is really nice. And also this week, actually, I'm working on switching how we load up Lucee to use the new JSR 223 standard. That's basically a Java standard for being able to run scripting languages. And Lucee conforms to that standard, which is important because that means that any random Java developer out there who wants to run some CFML code inside of their Java application can do that very easily using this well-documented public standard called JSR 223. They can load up Lucee inside of that framework, and they can hand it code and it'll run it. So since that's kind of a next logical progression of running CFML outside of a web server, we're reworking CommandBox to also use that same standard internally, which is great.
So a lot of new things you can now do in it. What's the top one or two things that come to mind that like, wow, now you can do this?
You want to know what the top thing is? It's 256 color support. I just completed that this week, and I'd wanted to do it forever. I'm half joking, but I'm half serious because it's so cool. Before, if you were writing custom commands or, ASCII art or task runners, you were stuck with 8 boring colors, the 8 basic ANSI colors, which is kind of 16 because there's a high intensity version of each color, but still 16 color, is so like 1980s. So now we've made it up to like the 1990s, and you can add 256 separate colors, which I joke, but it actually is pretty sweet. Some of the, the ASCII art and stuff that we do can look a lot prettier now. And I had people giving me a hard time about, the ugly colors in the shell. Some of the bigger features that are just really nice usability things are actually things that have been implemented externally as modules. An example is the CommandBox bullet train module, which is a dead ripoff from the iTerm bullet train plugin to the Max shell iTerm, which is a ripoff from the original Ubuntu Powerline shells. And basically what it means is, when you're working in the console, usually you have just a little boring, cursor or the prompt that has the folder you're in, or, something sort of boring, maybe the username you're logged in is. A Powerline-based prompt has, or, it's called bullet train because it looks like little kind of arrow cars on like, an L train or something. And it has a big, wide, kind of pretty, colorful prompt that gives you all sorts of kind of directory aware information. So the current folder is a server running Lucee 5, and it's currently started. And the current folder is a package called my package, and it's at version 1.5. And here's the current time, and here's how long the last command took to execute. And, here's other information about it. And I really liked, a lot of the people I work with use Max, and they use this, bullet train prompt in their core Max shell. And we said, man, we need to make a version of that for the CommandBox shell because it's a really nice productivity thing. And it just looks cool. It makes your shell look kind of sexy and sweet. And with the 256 colors, it doesn't look nearly as ugly anymore. And that's not even part of core CommandBox, but there were changes in CommandBox 4 to be able to make that, that module possible. One of the actual real biggest improvements, in my opinion, inside of CommandBox 4 is I upgraded the library, the Java library we use to handle the prompt and the tab completion that pops up all the possibilities you can type. That library is called JLine, and we upgraded a major version of JLine, which comes with a whole bunch of really nice features. So now, as you type commands in CommandBox, it highlights the commands as long as they're spelled correctly, so you can kind of visually see that your command is correct. The tab completion is really, really nice now. If you start typing a command and you hit tab and there's like 40 options, all 40 of them draw below. And it used to be if you kept hitting tab, it would just keep redrawing over and over again and scrolling all this nonsense up. Now it does this really smart thing where it just keeps redrawing the options, and as you type, it live filters them, and you can actually like use arrow and tab keys to tab between the options. It's just a way smoother interaction. The REPL in CommandBox now has syntax highlighting built into it, which is made possible with this new version of JLine. So as you type ColdFusion code, you can get tab completion on individual ColdFusion function names as well as variable names. And when you type a ColdFusion function, it highlights. It even has some features where as you type opening and closing parentheses, it highlights the matching ones. So you can have a lot better experience as you code. Even how it tracks the history is improved. And this is really just kind of in the category just making the CLI a more polished experience and just a lot nicer to use. Trying to think of any other real major. Let's see.
You mentioned REPL there, and not everyone may know what a REPL is.
Yeah. So I'm just reviewing my Jira tickets to see if there's anything huge. Oh, task runners have gotten a bunch of stuff. Oh, that's right. Better Control C support. I forgot about that. A REPL stands for Read, Evaluate, Print Loop, which is a really fancy way of saying you can run ColdFusion code one line at a time. Every other major language has had a REPL for a long time, and it allows you to do just quick and dirty experimentation with ColdFusion from the command line. So you can write a line of ColdFusion code script. You hit enter and it just immediately executes it and shows you the output of it. And with a REPL, you can create variables and then interact with them in the same session. They're remembered. I was actually using the REPL just about 2 days ago. I had a large JSON file, and I wanted to massage it and rearrange it a bit. And so I just opened up the REPL, did a file read to read it into a variable. And then with the REPL was just writing some, member functions and some MapReduce stuff to massage it and write it back out. And I didn't even need to start a server or create, an actual file on my hard drive to do it. I just, used the REPL as a little kind of scratch pad to, to create some variables and play around with them. Yeah, so that's the REPL. I forgot. Yeah, so better Control C support. It used to be that when you would hit Control C inside of CommandBox, it would exit out of the entire CommandBox process, which isn't what a shell normally does. Now, a lot of commands that weren't interruptible before, if you had a long-running command, it would just kind of get stuck until it was done and you had to wait for it. Now you can hit Control C and it actually does what you expect. It'll cancel whatever's currently running as soon as it can and drop you back at the CommandBox shell. And then Control D will actually exit you completely out of the shell. So that's a nice little enhancement that just makes usability improved. Let's see here. Is there anything else really nice? We've added some nice old class loading features. Yeah, a lot of those are kind of the big ones. I got some improved support for ConEMU, which is a terminal app for Windows users, because the built-in terminal in Windows kind of sucks, just the CMD. It's not really very nice, and that's what a lot of people use. So, and it only supports 16 colors, right? So ConEMU, which is a Windows app that supports all 256 glorious colors, along with a lot of other options. And so I worked a lot with the main developer in the JLine project to get really good support for ConEMU. So Windows people would have a shell that didn't suck quite as bad as the default Windows terminal does. So I'm overall really excited.
And how much has the price increased on CommandBox with this version?
500% of zero.
So it's still free.
Yeah, it's still completely free. Yeah, so we have, said to ourselves, we should, at some point actually try to make money to pay for all this development we put into this. We're actually tossing around some ideas of some, enterprisey commercial, modules, that might provide some really nice, tools or features that would interest large companies wanting to use it. But we don't really know what that would look like. In the meantime, if you use CommandBox day in, day out, and it saves you a heck of a lot of time, you can go to our Patreon page and you can just sign up to give us money every month. And and our Patreon supporters, the money that comes in from that literally goes directly to our open source development. That's what we use it for. But yeah, it's all still completely free. I mean, it would be very difficult to charge for basic, command line and REPL in the ColdFusion world when every other language has a totally free, command line and REPL. So, as always, we offer support, paid support, bug fixes, improvements, training around it. But the core product has always still been free. But I'm definitely very excited about the new CommandBox release. There's just a lot of little, features and nice things that we've packed in there that should make it a real treat to use. Oh, I almost forgot. One of the big things is finalized support for private packages, which is really more of a ForgeBox feature, but it requires, CommandBox to be aware of how that works. And the idea behind private packages is, you can write ColdFusion libraries, yay. You can publish them to ForgeBox, yay. Everyone in the world can, download and install them, yay. But what if you and your team of developers want to have some private packages that are only for you guys, proprietary internal code, and you still want to use all the bells and whistles of package management, but you don't want to publish them for the world to see. You just want to publish them for you guys to see. That's what private packages are. And right now, private packages are free on ForgeBox. At some point, we'll probably try to figure out a pricing model for that. But the idea is that you can publish a package that you can install just like any other package, but it's a special package only you can see and only your coworkers can see. And so CommandBox 4 will have finalized support for that, which is something we've gone through 2 or 3 iterations of development on, and we'll kind of find some issues and we'll refine it down. So that'll be another one of our big announcements into the box is finalized private packages. And one of the really cool features that Eric Peterson's been working on is not only the ability to have private packages, but the ability for ForgeBox to upload and store those for you automatically in a private S3 bucket for you. So, one of the problems with private packages is it still has to have, a download URL it can hit, and that needs to be private as well. So with the newest version of CommandBox and ForgeBox, you'll be able to publish a package, and ForgeBox will take care of storing that zip file for you in a private location. And then when you and your coworkers go to install it, you'll get a special, private URL you can download that from. And that's kind of all part of the private, package feature, which is also pretty exciting.
Well, so it sounds like some neat stuff coming up in the version 4 release. Now, you're teaching a whole day workshop deep dive on the first day of Into the Box. I guess it's a Wednesday. And so people coming to that, do they have to be CommandBox jockeys already, or can they come totally new? And I don't know what the correct term is for someone who's an expert at CommandBox.
There isn't one. Well, first of all, it's probably hard to imagine that I could talk for an entire day on just CommandBox. No, just kidding. So the class is a deep dive. So the idea is to kind of start at the top and really just work our way in to a bunch of different feature areas. The expectation is that people probably have poked at CommandBox and have used it. A lot of the people who came last year were people who were using CommandBox in some very small ways, and they thought to themselves, there's a lot here, I really want to dig in and just, learn all these other features so I can become more proficient. So if you haven't touched CommandBox, you'll probably be able to pick it up fairly quickly. The expectation is you probably vaguely are aware of what it does and you've played with a couple features, but you just really want to, learn a lot of the details. There's, so much surface area in CommandBox. It has a lot of major feature areas that it does, and each one of them has tons of little tips and tricks and, widgets and features. So it's, there's a lot of content to cover. And the way I usually conduct the class is I'll kind of poll people on, what they're most interested in, and we can kind of tailor the content as we go. So if everybody's telling me, I don't really care so much about this feature, but I really, really want to make sure we touch this feature, then, we can kind of adjust the schedule as we go to make sure we touch on the really popular topics that people want to learn about. And so, yeah, that's the first day.
And will people be able to get into? will people get some individual help from you or other teaching assistants there, or how
Yeah,
does that?
absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So we like to keep our workshops purposefully fairly small. We'll usually have a cap of about 10 people in a given workshop, and a lot of that is specifically so we can get a lot of one-on-one time. Because we spend a lot of part of the day just doing exercises. We talk about some cool features and show it, and we say, okay, you guys give it a try now. Everybody does the same thing on their laptop. And so, the idea is that I'm walking around, I'm, standing over your shoulder, giving you advice, helping you write the code. So it's definitely not just kind of, a conference setting where you're in a giant room full of people just listening. It's very interactive and hands-on, and our goal is to always have a lot of one-on-one conversation to help people over those things. Because a lot of times, people just need, some questions answered. They need pointed, at what they need to be typing, and then they can get it to click for themselves. And that happens, in my opinion, best when you kind of have someone who can just stand there, take a look at what you're doing, and say, okay, this is what you need to do, and then they can go from there.
So that's great. So once someone's trying this at home with CommandBox, is the help system? Is there a help system for CommandBox? I mean,
there is actually. CommandBox has a really good help system, in my opinion, and we had it since the very first version. That was important to us. A lot of people, and myself is included in that group, tended to stay away from command lines because they're difficult to figure out. If I'm managing IIS, for instance, and I don't know where a setting is, I can probably find it if I just click around the GUI enough and just read all the screens, right? When you're using the command line tool and you don't know what the options are, you're kind of I don't know what to do next. And, a lot of command line tools have varying syntaxes they use to get help. Some of them have really crappy help that doesn't include examples. And so then you're kind of stuck just Googling, trying to find examples. And that can be a major turnoff for people who, they don't see the command line as a productivity tool when all they do is waste all day long trying to figure out what the heck the parameters are they need to type in. So CommandBox has a really comprehensive help system already built in that right there from the CLI fully documents every single command, every single parameter that it needs to run, along with a description of them. And every single command in the entire CLI has one or more actual examples of how to run it, like copy and paste examples in the help documentation. And on top of that, it has tab completion for almost everything in the world. So if you're in the middle of typing a command and you hit tab, we'll tell you what all the options are. If you're in the middle of typing parameters and you hit tab, we'll tell you what all the options are. If you're in the middle of typing a parameter value and it's a directory path or something and hit tab, we'll tell you what all the possible options are. So we try to make it as foolproof as possible. And that's usually one of the things I cover in the, in the workshop as well, is just making sure people know about the help that's built in and how to use it. Because it's really kind of there to get you out of any tight spot you are. And in fact, the way the help is built in CommandBox, if you're in the middle of typing a command, no matter where you are in it, if you're just typing the name of the command or you're in the middle of the parameters and maybe you only have half the parameters in, you can stop and just add the word help to the end of a line and hit enter. And that will flag down the CommandBox help train, and it'll run over and take a look at what you've typed so far, figure out to the best of its abilities what it was you were trying to do, and give you the most specific help it can based on what you've typed. And, that's kind of important to me. A lot of help from CLI commands can only be run in very specific ways. But with CommandBox, just add the word help onto the end of a line, and the help, the help train comes over and helps you out. So those are all things that are built in, and those are the kind of things that I cover in the workshop as well, just to make sure people know it's out there. Because once you know that, you can get yourself out of most of the dark corners you find yourself in when you're scratching your head trying to figure out what you need to be typing.
So if someone listening hasn't used CommandBox and they were like, well, I'm curious now, let me try this out. How long before they could install it and actually do something in it and get started?
Sure, yeah. So the answer to that slightly varies based on the operating system, only because some operating systems have built-in package management, or just really common package managers. If you're on a Mac, for instance, a lot of people use Homebrew. which is just, it's a package manager, that you use to install things. So if you're a Mac user and you're using Homebrew, it's actually incredibly simple. You just type brew install CommandBox, and that's it. You can start running box server start to start servers, box REPL to start the REPL. There really is no installation of CommandBox. It's just a binary that you just download and stick in like your user bin folder or on Windows in some sort of system path. So you don't really need to install it. There's no installer. You just need the binary. If you're on Windows, which about 70% of ColdFusion developers are, according to the State of the CF Union survey, you just need to download the exe file and then unzip it. So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You just click the link, unzip it on your desktop, and double-click it. And as long as you have Java installed or you download the version that comes with Java bundled, there's usually nothing you need to do to get it up and running. It's just a matter of, double-clicking on the executable or, running box from the command line, and it'll just, drop you into CommandBox. And that was kind of our goal, is to have it be as, as quick and easy as possible. Because I found.
And does it come with sample scripts, Brad, or so you can kind of learn how to use it better?
Yeah. So the built-in help that I talked about has examples for every single command. If you're looking for a guide, kind of like a hand-holding guide, then that's where our Gitbook-based docs come in. Gitbook is a really cool website that lets you write documentation. It's actually free. I don't know how they pay their bills. I guess it's like GitHub. They have, people who pay. But we have a full book written. It's at commandbox.ortusbooks.com. And that has a getting started guide that kind of, walks you through the installation process and just using it. And it also has every area of CommandBox documented with, examples and kind of, copy and paste things you can use to run. So that's definitely out there, and it's pretty easy to get a hold of.
Great. So you could be within 5 minutes, you could download it, have it running, and actually try out some examples and start to learn how to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think if the barrier to entry to a brand new tool is very high at all, in my opinion, people, unless they're really, really interested, won't put in, a lot of effort. They're not going to spend, 2 hours trying to figure out all the pieces that need to happen. So that's why it's important for me that CommandBox is something you can just say, download this exe and double click on it and you're off, kind of thing. Because that's the kind of barrier to entry that's going to be low, and people can just get right into it and start messing around. Because like I said, a CLI is not a productivity tool if you spend more time trying to figure out how to use it than you do using it.
Yes, that could be some CLIs we won't name. So
Docker.
Yes. So you mentioned earlier that it has some scaffolding in there. What exactly do you mean by scaffolding commands in CommandBox?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of funny. Luis loves to remind me of this. When Luis first talked to me about CommandBox, just this idea that he had, which was like 4 or 5 years ago, and he wanted me to take over, I didn't necessarily think it made a great deal of sense. But I didn't really understand all the use cases at the time. And one of the first things he showed me was like, was scaffolding stuff. And he always likes to remind me, Brad, you thought this was a dumb idea originally. I don't know if I ever used the word dumb, but, at first I was like, well, why would you use this? But so the whole idea of scaffolding is, as a developer, you're creating new sites. If you're developing with ColdBox, you're creating new handlers, creating new views, creating new tests for TestBox, creating new models. You, depending on your workflow, you might just, right click and say new file, or you may copy an old file or an old site and just kind of copy it over. Maybe your IDE has some, built-in things, but it's something people do quite a bit. And, it's kind of time consuming sometimes to be able to, get a ColdBox handler in the right folder with all the right settings in place. And so the scaffolding stuff allows you to quickly ask the CLI to create a ColdBox application for you from scratch, or to create a new handler, or to create a new model, or to create a new test box test. So if I have an empty folder with no code in it, and I say to myself, I want to play with a ColdBox feature, but I don't want to fiddle with an existing website. I just want to start a new ColdBox site I can poke at and then just delete it when I'm done, I type the command ColdBox create app, and I hit enter. And CommandBox will dump all the files needed into that folder to have a fully working, ready to go ColdBox app, right, from scratch. And then I type server start, and it starts a server for me. So in 2 commands, I can go from an empty folder to a working, running ColdBox application that I can play around with, fiddle with the settings, try some stuff. And then when I'm done, I type server stop, server goes away, and I can just delete the folder, right? And the scaffolding makes it easy to do that. It used to be I would go to the ColdBox website, I would find the link to our sample apps, I'd download a zip, I'd unzip it, I'd copy and paste it manually. And that's just a time-consuming, effort. So if I want to add a service into my ColdBox app, I type ColdBox create model, my service, and it automatically creates the CFC in the right folder with an init method and the proper, comments and stuff just ready to go. It creates the tests for me automatically, so TestBox is happy. And that's really what the scaffolding is about, is just the ability to quickly generate files and folders based on templates, just to save you time, save you typing, save you, copying and pasting from other places.
That's great. So you mentioned earlier you can use this as a scripting tool, like you're writing batch files in effect. So can they do anything, just like it was a Windows batch file or Perl or whatever people write there,
absolutely.
Bash or...
So that's one of the coolest features, in my opinion, of CommandBox. And I didn't really see that take off as much until this last year when we created task runners. You've had the ability to create custom CommandBox commands since like version 2 or something. But there was enough boilerplate around it. You had to create a module, and then it had to have a commands folder, and you put a CFC, and then to distribute it, you had to like put the module in ForgeBox. It wasn't anything insurmountable, but it was a little bit too much work for just a random quick and dirty script. Like I just want to create a file with some CF code and just run it and play around with it, and who knows, I may delete it when I'm done. And so task runners, in my opinion, are kind of the pinnacle of where command line ColdFusion execution has moved to. It's a simple CFC, usually called task.cfc, and there's almost no boilerplate involved at all. It just needs to be a component, so the word component, open close curly, no big deal. And then by default, it looks for a function called run. So function run, open close curly, that's the only boilerplate you need. And of course, there's a task create command that scaffolds out an empty task for you. So you don't even have to worry about writing that. So as far as what it can run, your tasks are executed from the command line. So there's no server that needs to be started. There's no web browser involved. There's no IIS or Apache web server. It's just pure command line execution of your ColdFusion code. And you can do literally anything that ColdFusion can do. There's no limit to the tags or the functions that you can run. So just the other day, I had some CSV files, comma separated value files, that were, about 100 megs worth. And I needed to go do some manipulations on them. I wanted to filter out some of the lines. And so, I'm mostly a CFML developer. I know exactly how I would do that in CFML. So I scaffolded out a quick empty task that had like 15 lines of code, read the files in, turned them into an array, looped over them, did some nice little filtering, wrote the file back out at the bottom. And I just created that as a task. And from the command line, I could just type task run, and it would just execute my tasks. And that was just, it was faster than writing a bash script, or I don't even know if I could do that in a Windows batch file, or some other language. Just nice little, ad hoc chunks of functionality. And you can tie these up as cron jobs or scheduled tasks. They can interact with the file system. They can interact with the database if you want to use them to create backups or, run database calls. And, you can generate PDFs. You can send emails. You can do whatever you want from the command line that that just ColdFusion will allow you to do in general, which is really powerful. And it's generally, in my experience, more productive than trying to do the equivalent in Bash or some sort of slightly more arcane programming language. And it's natural to you as a CFML developer. It's just CFML code in a CFC file or CFM file, and you can just execute it from the command line. And so it's
of course, here, when you're running code remotely on a server, that code can't touch your development machine. But in this case, the development machine is the server, so you can get to any files you need to.
Yeah, exactly. It's all running right there locally on your machine. So, I mean, if there's something that you want to automate and script that you do on your local computer on a regular basis, yeah, I mean, you have access to all of your normal drives and things like that. So it's very handy for automating just anything you can think of.
Can it even automate other programs? Could you control another program using CFHTTP or
Yeah,
the browser?
Exactly. So what you can do actually really easily, and this has been a big feature in CommandBox since like version 3, is you can run other native binaries really easily from inside of CommandBox or from inside of task runners. So if you want to interact with Git CLI or with Ant or Maven or just Windows system commands or Linux system commands, anything imaginable that you might do normally from your shell, you can mash that together with your ColdFusion code, and you can run some ColdFusion code, fire off some command line task, and then run some more ColdFusion code, all from inside of a task runner, which makes it a great, kind of intermediate glue layer that you can stick in to pull all, these pieces together and wrap them all up in ColdFusion, which is something that I think CFML has always been good at. Quick and easy access to databases, to file systems.
So does this kind of let you replace or extend something like Jenkins that does continuous integration by writing scripts that fire off all kinds of useful events? Or
I wouldn't say replace, but absolutely extend. Almost all of our continuous integration jobs, whether it's our Bitbucket pipelines or our Jenkins server or our Travis CI builds, use CommandBox in some manner, sometimes multiple different manners, as part of our builds. So we use CommandBox to start and stop the servers we run our tests on. We use CommandBox to run the test box tests themselves. We use CommandBox to install the dependencies. And we even use CommandBox just to run arbitrary tasks that might update file permissions or create some zip files as part of a build. So it doesn't replace those continuous integration tools, but it's a perfect piece to build in as one of the core building blocks that your continuous integration server uses to do the stuff you want it to do.
So you could have the continuous integration server call one of these CommandBox scripts to, fire off some database updates or emailing or whatever you wanted it to do.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, what this gives you the ability to do is to just tap into ColdFusion anywhere you want. Because otherwise, if you wanted to, update a database at the end of a job or send an email, you know exactly how to do that in ColdFusion. It's really easy. But, you never had ColdFusion available at your fingertips to do those sort of things. You had to go figure out how to do it in Bash or with some other utility. So, yeah, if you want to, run a query as part of a Jenkins build, you can just create a little, task, and you tell ColdFusion to run it, and you just stick that inside, to be called from Jenkins. And there's a lot of endless possibilities there.
You'll be telling me next that you can use it to write robots using your Raspberry Pi version of ColdFusion.
Like this robot here.
Oh,
this little guy.
For those who are listening on audio, it's like a little car, and in the middle of it, there's a small Raspberry Pi processor
with eyes that peer into your soul. It's actually an ultrasonic depth sensor. Sadly,
depth or death? You say it's like a death ray?
No, it measures distance.
Oh, okay.
I had this guy currently programmed to find his way through mazes, but sadly, he does not use ColdFusion. He uses Python, which I didn't particularly enjoy. It's what came on it by default, but I need to.
But you'll get used to pressing the tab key with Python.
Oh my gosh, your code doesn't run is because it's not indented correctly. Well, so I mean, I've already done hardware automation with CommandBox and ColdFusion using Raspberry Pis. Now I have the hat that I wore a few years back to all the CF conferences one year that had blinking LEDs with scrolling text, and that was all ColdFusion powered using CommandBox. So that kind of stuff is all possible right now. Just needs maker people out there to play with it.
It's amazing. There's no limit to this. I mean, I've seen people, but I saw this in this Raspberry Pi book. Someone built a whole Dalek powered by a Raspberry Pi.
Awesome.
They took a dustbin and put glued things on it. And exactly, it could, because you can have voice stuff. Can you do voice stuff from ColdFusion? I guess you'd play a MP3 or something. Or
I don't know. Actually, I'll be honest. I've never tried that. I don't know what you do just in general. I don't know what that would look like. It would probably have to involve a Java library. I've honestly never tried to interact with the local sound card before.
yeah.
And the Raspberry Pi has, a headphone output, but that's one thing I've never played with.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about the server management, which we mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're spinning up a server, do you get to control the configuration of the server, or is that
No,
defaulted? Or
no, you get no choice in the matter.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Of course you do.
I was going to say it would be a bit silly if you couldn't tweak with that.
Yeah.
So
you can control every single last aspect you could possibly hope or dream for or imagine, and in my opinion, it's easier and it's faster and more tidy than any other possible server solution out there, including the typical Adobe installer, Tomcat, or anything. There's a lot of missing pieces, in my opinion, in server management. Specifically, if you want to be able to reproduce a server, servers in ColdFusion were always typically, as they say, servers as pets, as opposed to servers as cattle. Very lovingly created individual unique snowflake servers that might take you weeks to build out and manually modify all the settings, which I mean is okay to an extent, but now you need all 15 developers of your organization to have the exact same server, or you need all 5 of your production servers to have the exact same configuration. Oh wait, can we add a 6th one now? And when you get into the Docker realm, where the entire idea is servers are these little wisps in the breeze that pop up and disappear at any point in time. How do you script entirely the creation of a server that says, here's my code, here's the version of ColdFusion I want to run, here's all the data sources and the mappings and the settings, here's the JVM args, the memory. How do you wrap that up in a nice little tidy bundle, with a little bow on top of it that you can reproduce every time on any computer? And in my opinion, the only good answer to that at this point in history is CommandBox. There's literally no other solution that lets you wrap it up as tidy as CommandBox does. So you can control the JVM arguments, the heap size. You can create virtual directories as a basic web server built in. You can modify the ports it runs on, HTTP, HTTPS, SSL ports. There's an AJP listener if you want to put it behind IIS. And all this is in one nice little tidy JSON file, right? So there's no shell scripts, there's no XML files. And then there's another project which integrates very tightly with all of this, which was very new last year into the box. And we're going to be covering a lot of it this year, which is called CFconfig, for lack of a better name. And that allows you to completely automate via JSON all of the ColdFusion settings that you normally have to set inside of the ColdFusion administrator. So things like your ColdFusion mappings, your data sources, your request timeouts. If you're a government employee, all those lockdowns, those STIGs that are mandated you have to apply, right? You can automate the crap out of those where you don't have to manually log in and click 5,000 buttons to lock down your server. You can create, a JSON file that represents the settings you want, and you can load that in. And CommandBox has, first-class support for that via the CFconfig module. So between those two things and, all the functionality of CommandBox that allows it to automatically download whatever it needs, you just tell it, I want Adobe 2016 or Lucee 5.3, and it just goes and gets it for you. You can literally control every aspect of how the server starts, even the version of Java you want it to use, and you can wrap it up in a very portable and very reproducible manner where anybody else in the world could take that same code and a couple JSON files and they could start the exact same server on their machine that you have on your machine. And I think that's kind of where the allure of using CommandBox, has come from is, You mean to tell me everybody on my team gets the exact same server and synchronizing our differences is as easy as committing a JSON file? Yeah. And so, Ortus, we have our Docker images, which we've had for a while now. As far as I know, the only real professionally supported Docker images capable of running Adobe, by the way, as well as Lucee. And what are they based on? They're based on CommandBox, because it only makes sense. The entire idea of Docker is you take an entire server and you wrap it up with a bow on top, and you can reproduce that anywhere you want. And it's like, well, perfect. That's what CommandBox does. So our Ortus Docker images are all based around all the functionality that CommandBox provides for you. And as far as a holistic workflow, and we're actually getting into one of my talks now, is, you can have the same configuration that you use for your local development, that you use in your staging server, that you use in your production Docker deployments, because it's all CommandBox through and through the entire process. And that really takes a load off the trouble that people typically run into, where your production server is configured way different than your development server, but you're not really sure what the differences are, and all you know is your code doesn't work, and that can be a real headache. The CFconfig utility will actually even diff configuration between two ColdFusion installations, and it'll tell you exactly what settings are different between the two of them or missing. And that kind of functionality and productivity just doesn't really exist anywhere outside of the CommandBox universe. And I think that's why the server.
I think that's genius, Brad, because it's genius because not only can you script how it's configured and you can share that script with other team members, but you could also stick it in version control. So that if you're because sometimes bugs happen because the server config changed, so.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we have support for Docker secrets and environment variables, so things like passwords or, S3 access tokens can all be externalized in a secure manner, and different per server. But absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the ability to store your configuration in version control can really be huge in keeping track of just what's changed in a server, and what it takes to fully configure your application. And there's really no way to do that outside of CommandBox. If you wanted to back up all the configuration in just a typical Adobe installation, you'd have to go like digging through the bowels of the server installation and like ripping out XML files and, I don't know, zipping them up or something horrible. There's just no good way to really deal with that kind of stuff. And with CommandBox, all that stuff just sort of gets abstracted for you. And it's even interesting. The JSON format that CFconfig uses is completely generic. It's not specific to any ColdFusion engine. So that actually means that you can define ColdFusion data sources that you want created. This MySQL server on this host and this port with this username and password. And whether or not you start an Adobe ColdFusion server or a Lucee server doesn't even matter. CommandBox and CFconfig will translate that generic JSON definition of your settings correctly into whatever the target server is you wish to start, and it just works. You don't have to worry about it. So, converting an application from one version of Lucee to another, or from Adobe to Lucee, or vice versa, all of a sudden just got a whole lot easier when you're using CommandBox.
That is great. So let's look at one of the other issues or features with CommandBox, which is if you want to use a package from ForgeBox. Does it help you with that, or do you have to do it manually? Or
yeah, so package management is kind of one of the big tiers that we haven't touched. But CommandBox has a kind of first-class integration with the ForgeBox.io website, which is essentially a giant code repo on the internet for ColdFusion developers to share all of their libraries with the world, and specifically all of the Ortus libraries and tools that we write all go out on ForgeBox. So when you're writing an application and you want to be able to pull in all these different libraries, from people all over the world that have published them, CommandBox's package management features do that for you. So instead of, I want to use the ColdBox framework, instead of going to the ColdBox, .org website, clicking the download page, downloading a zip file, unzipping it, copying and pasting it, that's all a thing of the past. You pull open your trusty CLI and you type install space ColdBox and you hit enter and you're done. ColdBox is now installed in that directory. You don't have to worry or think about all those implementation details. And when we're done installing it, we cache the zip file locally in a local artifacts cache. And the next time you install ColdBox, we don't even have to download it again. We're like, oh, look, it's right here. We'll just reuse it. And so that's where the package management stuff comes in. Now, you don't have to be using ColdBox to use the package management stuff in CommandBox. You know, some people in the beginning thought, well, it ends in the word box, so it must be a ColdBox specific thing. But that's not the case at all. CommandBox is completely standalone. In fact, there's integrations into Mura, into Framework One, into CF Wheels, even I think Far Cry. There's all kinds of, you know, non-box people that are using CommandBox and its scaffolding and its package management, because it really was meant to be a generic CFML, you know, tool. So, you know, there are lots of libraries on ForgeBox that have nothing to do with ColdBox, just, you know, generic libraries on OAuth or security utilities and things of that nature. And you can still use CommandBox to pull those in as third-party dependencies into any application, regardless of whether you're using the framework or not.
Well, that makes it really easy to try out different packages, you know, and also it makes it great for people who are writing packages, which I encourage everyone listening to write at least one package, because if you've got some cool code in your app, you know, why not share it with other people? And, you know, you're more likely to have bugs found if you share it out anyway, or get new features added. So,
yeah, I mean, we've boiled down the process of publishing a package to about as simple as it can get. You can literally create a ForgeBox account if you don't already have one from the command line. You can use the scaffolding commands like package init to turn an empty folder into a package. You add your code into it, and then, you know, you can use the publish command to automatically publish it to ForgeBox. And it's really pretty seamless.
And the advantage for someone who's creating packages, you can then test it against, you know, 7 different versions of ColdFusion, or however many you want to test against.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you could automate that.
Yeah, most of the Travis builds on my open source projects that I care enough about to have a Travis build on will automatically run my integration tests or my unit tests against all of the major versions of Adobe ColdFusion and Lucee. Because what will happen is I'll be testing locally on Lucee, and I'll leave off a semicolon at the end of a line, right? Lucee lets me do that. And so I'll think, hey, my code works great. I commit it, I push it, you know, and a week later, somebody tries to run on Adobe ColdFusion. We're like, hey, what's wrong with you, you idiot? Your code doesn't even compile. And I'm like, oh, I didn't test it on Adobe. So, you know, with the magic and power of things like Travis CI in conjunction with CommandBox and its ability to start servers, I can get immediate feedback on my open source projects. You know, when I commit some code and push it, Travis will test that code against Lucee 4, Lucee 5, Adobe 10, 11, 2016, you know, whatever you want. In fact, we're actually testing our internal ColdFusion libraries against the pre-release of Adobe Aether 2018 right now, because, you know, it's important for us to have immediate, you know, feedback to know if something's not working. And the ability to do that is a real improvement. And you mentioned, you know, installing libraries. One of the biggest, what's almost more useful to me than the ability to install a library with CommandBox is the fact that I can ask CommandBox, hey, can you remind me all the libraries I've installed, because it keeps track of them for you. And specifically, I can say, hey, CommandBox, is there a new version of any of these libraries? Like, is there anything I should be updating? Have I gotten out of date? Because that's kind of like the bane of a developer's existence. Is it's easy to install like jQuery, right? But, you know, a year later you're thinking, isn't there a new version that's come out? I don't know. I'll have to check. With CommandBox, you can just ask it. Be like, you run the outdated command. Say, hey, do I have any modules, you know, or packages that are outdated? And CommandBox it knows what you've installed. It'll go and hit ForgeBox and check, and it'll come back and be like, actually, you know what? 3 of these packages are old. There's new versions. Here they are. Do you want to install them? And you go, oh, yeah, go ahead and install those for me. And CommandBox goes, okay, I just updated them. Everything's up to date now. And so that ongoing maintenance of your applications is really where the benefit, in my opinion, comes into play. I mean, it's great that you can install them, but as you go, keeping stuff in sync and updated is so much easier when you can just ask CommandBox to just update everything for you, and it just does it.
Now, CommandBox sounds really like it does a lot of things, but suppose there's something it didn't do that you wanted it to do. Can you extend it, or are you stuck with how it works?
You can absolutely extend it, and that's been kind of one of the core building blocks from the beginning, is I wanted people to be able to extend it. I mentioned that there's Framework 1 and CF Wheels integrations in CommandBox. That's actually precisely how those came into being. I didn't write those. The maintainers of Framework 1 and CF Wheels wrote those as custom CommandBox modules. And so they were able to write a module that contributes extra commands into the CLI that users can run, and they can also contribute extra behaviors. So for instance, when you install, Preside CMS is another example of this. When you install a Preside plugin or a CF Wheels plugin, they kind of have their own conventions that they use, the folder names they expect those, those plugins to go into. And so CommandBox is extensible to the point where they can write a module that automatically, overrides installation directories based on the package type. So anybody can kind of build a custom module onto ForgeBox that adds behaviors, that adds commands, that adds, modifies how installations work. And since, it's all written in ColdFusion, it's already in your native tongue. You don't have to go too far out of your way, to extend it. So yeah, it's very extensible. And of course, in a very meta style, the, CommandBox modules that you write, you host on ForgeBox, just like all your other packages. So when your friends and family want to install a cool module, like maybe the CommandBox host updater module that Chris Schmitz wrote, helps keep your host file in sync, right? You can just install that right off of ForgeBox, and it gets installed in the CommandBox to reload the shell, and you're off to the races. So I think that's kind of a big feature, is that you can add in functionality that you'd like to see, and that kind of also relieves me as the the main CommandBox maintainer of having to make everything a core feature, because I know every cool idea somebody has doesn't necessarily need to be in the core of CommandBox, and with the extensibility that CommandBox modules provide, it doesn't need to be in the core of CommandBox. People can spin it off as a separate project, and only people who care about it can install it.
That's great. And I noticed in the module stuff there's something called interceptors. What exactly does that do for you?
Yeah, interceptors are a very common design pattern. It's basically, imagine if you've ever used jQuery, right? And you're making like an AJAX call, and you have like an on success method, and you say, if and when this AJAX call comes back successful, run this method. Or you have an on error method, if and when this AJAX query errors, go ahead and run this method. That's the basic concept here, is you have certain events, if you will, that may or may not happen over the life of your CLI, over the life of a running command, a server being started. And the CommandBox application will automatically announce these events when they happen. It'll say, hey, the CLI is starting. Hey, I'm about to run a command. Hey, I'm about to start a server. Hey, the CLI is about to be closed. And then in a totally decoupled manner, you can register these listeners, or interceptors as we call them, that say, you know what, anytime the CLI starts up, go ahead and ping me. I have some code I want to run. And that's the basic interceptor pattern, is this publish subscribe concept. You have the core CLI announcing or publishing these events, and then you have 0 or more interceptors or listeners that have kind of subscribed to those, and they say, let me know, I want to run something. So a really good example of that is a very simple module I wrote earlier this year called the CommandBox update checker. And it's a very simple module. Every time you open up the CLI, it only does it once a day, so it's not annoying. But every time you open up the CLI once a day, I guess, it checks to see if there's either a new version of CommandBox that you need to update to, or if any of your core CommandBox modules are out of date. Just a nice little reminder, that says, oh, hey, there's a new version out. You should probably update that. And so that module taps into the on CLI start interception point. So every time the CLI starts, it says, hey, the CLI is starting. And if you have that module installed, it goes, oh, here, just a second. I need to do some stuff. Makes some HTTP calls, outputs some text to the screen, if it needs to. And then, you're on your way again. So that's what the interceptors are. And they're very powerful when it comes to being able to use CommandBox modules to kind of inject functionality into existing parts of a CLI without needing to go in and muck around with the core code and change anything. Your interceptors can just sit off to the side with their ear to the ground, listening for these events to be announced, and they can jump in and they can run additional logic or even change the course of what's happening on the fly. In fact, that CommandBox bullet train module that I talked about, that listens to an event called pre-prompt, I believe. It might be on prompt. But anytime the prompt is drawn, there's an interception that gets announced. And then the module is actually able to change on the fly what the prompt text looks like by modifying some values in memory and passing them back and saying, oh, hey, you're about to draw the prompt. I tell you what, use this prompt instead. So there's a lot of power in that interceptor module, and those are very core to the extensibility of CommandBox.
Wow, it sounds really super extensible.
That's the goal.
Yeah. So it sounds like an amazing whole day workshop you're going to be doing there, Brad, on the first day of the Into the Box. But you're also teaching some other workshops. Just briefly, what are the other workshops or talks that you're involved in?
Yeah, so I'm going to be sharing a bit during the keynote on the first day. Our keynote is kind of a day where we take a chance to just give an overview of everything we've done that year. All the new libraries we've started on, all the major releases we've had, any kind of conceptual game-changing, shifts that we're trying to introduce. Last year, Docker was kind of our big, push is us getting behind that. So I'll be talking about some of the new things in CommandBox and ForgeBox as part of our keynote. I'm also giving some just regular sessions. I have one called Thinking Modularly, and that's really just kind of covering a lot of the basic bases on what it means to use package management. How does that actually work in your application? How does that affect how you use Git source control? How does that affect your build server? How does that affect your production deployments? In fact, a lot of my sessions this year are kind of focusing on just some of the real basic core concepts. I think sometimes we get, and by we, I include myself, get carried away with some of the whiz-bang features. And a lot of times there's people out there who just are looking for the onboard ramp. They're like, well, here, just get me started first, right? So a lot of my sessions are kind of in that getting started category, like just what's some real basic, meat and potatoes of how these features. So thinking modularly is just kind of covering, what package management looks like, how it should affect your development to really use it effectively. And so that should be a fun class. And of course, that won't really even be specific to ColdBox. That'll be package management just for anybody. I also have one integrating MVC into legacy apps. That's been a really popular topic this year. We've had a lot of clients coming to us who have legacy apps that have been around for 10, 15, maybe 20 years, and they're saying, hey, we really want to start bringing these into the the 21st century. And a lot of people just don't know where to get started. It's a big task, and ColdBox looks like a big thing, and they're like, what's the first step I do just to get ColdBox running alongside my existing application, and what are my next steps to go from there? And that's something we've done with a lot of clients, and it's something that I want to cover just the basics of. So it's not a hardcore MVC course, and it's not even really an intro to MVC. It's just saying, if you have a legacy app, what does it look like to start integrating MVC into that and converting things over? Another one of my talks is Wirebox Basics. This is also another one of those talks. I didn't want to get too far off in the weeds of some of the really, cool but advanced Wirebox use cases. I see a lot of people asking questions who are coming from maybe Framework 1 and DI1, or maybe they're just coming from Cold Spring or from no dependency injection at all. They're just saying, like, this, how do I just use the basics of Wirebox? How do I get that sucker installed? How do I tell it where my CFCs are? And it's very easy to use, but I think that easiness, if that's a word, can get lost in with all the advanced features, and it starts to look complicated from, 20,000 feet. So I just want to kind of show, like, just what's the basic bare bones. Let's install Wirebox. Let's point it at a folder of CSCs. Let's start, injecting CFCs, and then that'll give people a solid base, and they can, investigate those advanced features on their own time. But I want to make sure people have a solid footing on Wirebox. And then the last session I'm giving is take your CF apps from local dev to production with CommandBox and CF config, and Docker. And that's kind of everything we were just talking about a minute ago with the whole, CommandBox server thing. This has been an ongoing journey inside of Ortus as we developed these tools ourselves, and as we kind of, figured out how to use them ourselves, and we kind of worked through all the pain points, and we thought to ourselves, man, this really sucks. How can we make this easier? And so this is just kind of, covering all the basic pieces. If you want to consolidate, your server workflow from your local development, your staging, your production, Docker, CFconfig, CommandBox, how do all these crazy pieces work together? That's kind of what that session is. It's just introducing you to everything you should at least be aware of. And even if you're thinking, well, I'm not going to use Docker, that's fine. I mean, the other 90% of a session will probably still be applicable in some manner, because it's all the same basic JSON files. It's the same basic, CommandBox commands. And whether or not you use them in Docker, or whether or not you wrap up CommandBox as a Windows service, and you run it on a Windows VM, you still have the same functionalities available to you. So
great.
That'll be that session.
So lots of amazing sessions you're either teaching or helping with there. What else are you looking forward to at this year's Into the Box?
The mariachi band. You should know that. But no, seriously, I really, really love to just talk with people who are using, our tools to build cool stuff, and just hearing what they're doing with it. Every year I kind of come away with a bit of a better appreciation for, where people are at and the pain points that it's helping them with, but also more specifically, the pain points that we aren't addressing, because people will, in person, you're just having a conversation and people will say, yeah, this library is working good for me, but I was kind of wondering, is there any way that I could do X, Y, Z, and that'll plant the seed for a new feature, or maybe a kind of a gap that we're not covering. And I really love those part of, conferences, is just talking with people and hearing, kind of the stories, the success stories that they have, as well as, the missing pieces that they're kind of wishing we would, fill a gap here or build a tool for this. So those are always kind of the best takeaways from me from the conference.
So for folks interested in going to Into the Box, where can they find out about it?
Intothebox.org. So intothebox.org. That's our conference site. Let's see, our early bird still on sale, or is that over? Let me double check real quick. Of course, I don't know when this podcast will air, so I probably shouldn't make any statements about whether or not early bird is still going. But yeah, you can review the April 27th when sales end. Okay, so it looks like early bird is already over, but not to worry. Into the Box is overall an incredibly cheap conference by comparison. So the sessions are on the website, the speakers are on the website, an overview of all the topics and the tools are on the website. We also have some great sponsors that are all listed there on the website. In fact, there's one in here called TerraTech. Those seem like some pretty useful guys. They're our media sponsor. Of course, we have Adobe is our platinum sponsor, which is really nice. We actually have Couchbase sponsoring this year, so we're going to have a representative from Couchbase showing up. I told him he needs to do all of his demos in CFML, so we'll see if that happens. But yeah, so there's lots of information there on the Into the Box website. So.
And it's happening April 25th to 27th in Houston, Texas. So.
Exactly. Yeah, there's two basic tickets. There's the conference-only ticket, which is just the 2 days of sessions. And then there's the all-access pass, which includes the workshops, your choice of one workshop. So if you're not interested in the CommandBox deep dive workshop that I've been talking about, we have containerizing CFML apps, which is aimed at people that are looking into this Docker thing. They're like, hey, how does this Docker stuff work? Right, get me going on that. There's BDD with TestBox. There's also ColdBox from Zero to Hero, but I think that guy has got to be sold out by now. We have had a huge interest in ColdBox Zero to Hero. We actually added an additional training assistant to that so we could accept more people. So I think we ended up with like 15 people in that workshop. So some of these workshops can fill up fast. So, check it out quick. But yeah, so there's the basic conference, and then there's kind of the all access pass that gives you the workshop the day before.
Fabulous. Well, I really enjoyed it last year. If anyone listening is in doubt, this is a great conference to go to. Great location, beautiful hotel, and amazing speakers and attendees last year. And the mariachi band was pretty amazing.
My favorite part is hearing Jorge sing along with the songs.
Ah, there you go.
Apparently, when you're from El Salvador, you actually know the songs they sing.
I imagine you would, yes.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you had a good time last year. I'd like to just add, our focus with Into the Box is ironically, despite its name, is not only box products. We have a lot of topics that are actually we have some brand new speakers this year. I'm really excited about some people like Brian Class. I don't know if I've had Mark Drew before. I think Dan Fredericks is coming. John Farrar. A lot of people who aren't even really doing cold box development at all, but they have just generic hard hitting ColdFusion centric topics. So we do aim to be a conference that would appeal to any ColdFusion developer just kind of looking to up their game and learn about tools and best practices. But our main rule of thumb, at least mine, is that the topics should all either be directly a ColdFusion topic or some tool that directly applies to you as a ColdFusion developer. So you won't really see us having topics on what's new in Node.js or mastering WordPress, right? I mean, I don't think people come to ColdFusion conferences to learn about Node or WordPress. They come here because they're ColdFusion developers. So we talk about tools, we talk about NoSQL things like Couchbase that have immediate pluggability into your ColdFusion apps, or we talk directly about ColdFusion, and it's not always, or it's not even oftentimes related to the box ecosystem at all. So I say that for two reasons. People thinking, well, I'm not a cold box user. Well, don't worry about it. There's still tons of content for you. And people saying, well, is this really dedicated ColdFusion content? And it really is. I mean, everything we talk about is directly applicable in some manner to you as a ColdFusion developer, not you as a possibly Python developer or any of that stuff. We're focusing on CFML. That's what we're at.
So in the words of Henry Ford, you could say this is not your father's box.
Yeah, I never knew that quote was from Henry Ford.
Yeah, I think it was. But in particular, folks who may not have checked out this conference, it's no longer a one-day event. It's a whole 3 days of great stuff. And it's expanded beyond. Well, I think when it started, it was just focused on box stuff, but now it's got a whole bunch of ColdFusion stuff as well as the box stuff.
The first year we did this, it was a 2-track 1-day event that we did 1 day before the CF Objective Conference. And so the content was very limited, in those early days, but we've really been able to expand it, with 3 days of workshops and sessions, we're able to fit in quite a bit of content, which is really nice.
Great. Well, congratulations on that. And I understand you've sold more tickets already than people came last year. So
yeah, absolutely. Our registrations have already surpassed last year, and we're still a month out. And there's quite a few people who kind of wait till the last, month to buy. So we're very excited to see, how many people we'll have this year, for sure.
And it's also easy to get to because you just go to George Bush International or Hobby in Houston, either way.
Yep, it's right there in Houston. It's always warm. It's always nice. We always have a great time. It's a pretty fun place to stay. And if you're going to be in for a while, actually, I had someone asking me today, what kind of activities there were in Houston to do because they were going to fly over from Europe, and they're like, they're going to take a 10-hour flight, So there's a lot to do, there in Houston as well if you want to, stay a couple extra days before you leave. So.
Yeah, and I would say that April's probably the best month to go to Houston because it can get really hot and steamy in the summer, but April is not that time. So
yeah, it's usually pretty nice in April, which I think works really well.
Great. So just 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap this up, which is the one I'm asking everyone, which is, why are you proud to use ColdFusion? And let's just answer that for today, because I know I've asked you that question before.
You have. I'm trying to see if I can give you a
Yeah.
different answer than I've given you. I don't remember what I probably said last time. I'm proud to use ColdFusion personally because it's a product that I feel like I've been able to have input in, even though it's probably in very small ways, between Adobe, and just the ticket tracker and being on the pre-releases, and Lucee being a member and, having the occasional pull request merged. It kind of creates ownership, to a degree that ColdFusion isn't just something that other people created that I use, but ColdFusion is something that, I've been helping create, like I said, even in very small ways, over the last, 15 years or so. So it's more than just a cool tool that somebody else made, but it's something that it's a journey that a lot of us have been on for years. And I think that's part of what makes ColdFusion special to me and makes me proud to use it.
All right, excellent. And then final question is, what would it take to make ColdFusion even more alive this year?
For every single CF developer to come to Into the Box.
All right. I'm sure you've got room for a few 100,000 people in Houston, Texas. It's a big state.
Well, we might need to, move to an arena. We can actually fit like 200 people in the hotel we're in now, so we have plenty of room. But I don't know about 200,000. There's really a lot of answers to that question that are all probably equally as valid. Honestly, but seriously answer is probably the same as what I've said before, which is really just about people in the ColdFusion community engaging like they haven't engaged before. Using frameworks, learning new tools, publishing packages on ForgeBox, contributing to open source. I mean, as a maintainer of a number of open source libraries, there's nothing that makes my day brighter than getting a pull request, even if it's just a typo of mine that somebody fixed. I love getting pull requests and I love merging them in, and in the same way that, I feel a small amount of ownership of ColdFusion, over the years, helping little bits here and there. I like the fact I was looking at CommandBox yesterday, actually. There's 39 contributors, I think, in GitHub. That means, 39 people, including me, that have in some way contributed code, documentation, little bits. And I love that because all of those people all have a small amount of ownership now in CommandBox. It's partially theirs as well. They've all poured into it a bit, which I really like. And I think that can't happen enough. And the more that happens, I think the more alive ColdFusion becomes.
Well, you heard it here first. I mean, I just want to paraphrase that. It's sort of like that Uncle Sam recruiting poster where Uncle Sam's pointing his finger out of the poster saying, but he's going to say, your language needs you to engage. So everyone listening, what could you do today to do just a small piece of engagement, get started?
Yeah.
Makes a difference. So if folks want to find Brad Wood online, what are the best places to find you, Brad?
The easiest way to find me is to say something bad about ColdFusion on Twitter. I'll usually reply within a matter of minutes to prove you're wrong. Only half joking. No, if
they say something good or tell them how they engaged?
Then
respond?
I'll favorite it and I'll retweet it in a matter of minutes. No, if somebody wants to ask me a question about CommandBox or ColdBox or ForgeBox or any box or Into the Box, I am on Slack, the CFML Slack team, 27 hours a day, even in my sleep. You can come in there and tag me in the Box Products channel, and you can ask any question you want. And I never miss a message on Slack, even if I'm not, there. In fact, actually, someone was messaging me while we were doing this podcast, and I'm going to reply to them as soon as we hang up. So that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Of course, if you don't want to talk to me, you just want to, stalk me or something, you can follow me on Twitter, or BTWForge9S is my Twitter handle, and you can also check out my blog, codersrevolution.com, even though I don't blog a great deal there. Most of what I blog is actually probably on the ortussolutions.com blog as well. I blog occasionally. In fact, I've made several screencasts recently, and I'll usually throw a blog up on them. So that's where you can cyber stalk me if you need.
Excellent. Well, we'll put all those links together with all the things that we mentioned in the episode and the show notes on the TerraTech site for this podcast episode. And thanks so much for coming on the show, Brad.
Yeah, thanks a lot.